Alright, guys. After how last week's episode of Mob ended, I sat and thought to myself for a little bit, like, how exactly are we going to end this show? And from the trailers that we got for this final arc, we kind of had a rough idea of what was going to happen already. But I was kind of hoping we weren't going to do it this way, you know? Because here's the thing. I don't really love the direction we're going in right now. Because I feel like over the course of the show, Mob has worked so hard. He's worked so hard to make sure stuff like this doesn't happen. And yes, I know he's prone to this kind of stuff. Like, this has happened constantly in the show. Him losing control of his powers and all that, and going on a rampage. But he's just worked so hard to better himself that I don't know if we really needed something like this, you know? And I get it. We get a big, huge spectacle fight for the end of the show, of course. We bring in everyone that he's ever met and interacted with to come and try to stop him. And it's going to be satisfying. I know it is, but I just don't know. I feel bad for Mob that he's just worked so hard and we're still back to this. You know, it sucks. And at this point, I can only really see three people. Only three people come to mind that could even potentially stop Mob right now. I would say it's Reagan, obviously, is one of them. Tsubami, I think, could actually be another one. That's two. And I think Dimple could stop Mob. I don't think Dimple's dead, actually, but I don't know. Instead of speculating, let's get into what we do know and talk about Mob Psycho 100, Season 3, I should say, Episode 10, because it's an intense episode. So our episode begins with, well, frankly, Mob just being a hero as he saves this kid's life by pushing him out the way of the car at the cost of getting hit himself. And it doesn't look good, to be honest. I'll be honest. Mob's in a bit of a pinch. As we see just everyone gathering around him, kind of not realizing what to do. But they decide to end up calling an ambulance. But they notice that all their devices aren't working right here. And that something is wrong. And all of a sudden, we just see a giant crater appear under Mob. Very abruptly. And it's here we transition across the entire city as everything's going wrong. There's traffic like crazy because electronic devices aren't working. Everyone's in a panic and they think it's an earthquake with how much the ground is shaking. And it's here we transition to Reagan's place as he sees on the news that there's a large-scale evacuation in progress. And everyone is kind of panicking, as Shirazawa tells him, yeah, it looks like they're evacuating everyone. There's been an evacuation order. But that sucks because Mob was going to ask out that girl. As Reagan tells him, yep, that's not happening right now, man. But it's here that we see his favorite mug just get a chip in it and crack, showcasing that something really bad is happening. And as we transition to an officer in the city, he is terrified, saying, the suspect is around 160 centimeters tall, he's wearing a school uniform and holding a bouquet. As we just see the absolute destruction that Mob is causing around him. And as we transition to the forest where Mob was headed, we get our first glimpse of him. And he looks bad. This is not a good situation. And it's here we see that Hanazawa actually flew out there as fast as he could because he knew it was Mob saying, I had a hunch you'd be here, so I flew over at the speed of light. He tells Mob that I don't know what happened, but if you'd like, I'd be happy to listen. But as he's saying that, Mob literally just sends a huge psychic wave towards him. But Hanazawa is able to brush the attack off fairly easily. As he tells Mob, you got some flowers, that's great. But it might be a little dangerous to go as you are right now, just a little bit. But this time, Mob sends an even stronger psychic energy towards him and truly sends him flying this time. And it's here that Hanazawa realizes that I'm not able to get through to him. As he says, you leave me no choice, and is forced to actually have to restrain Mob. But Mob easily busts out of it and sends him flying again. That's going to be a common trope this episode. As Hanazawa says, the way you are right now reminds me of when we first met. As he says, Kageyama, stop this. You should head home for the day. It's for your own good. As he says that Kageyama taught me something very important. How I was the one who was average for relying on these powers as these two start fighting. How important it is to accept yourself without any psychic powers. I can tell that Kageyama is trying to do just that. As he says that Kageyama isn't the kind of person who'd hurt others as he gets flung into the ground. This is starting to turn into a really tough situation for Hanazawa, as he sends out a psychic energy of himself and notices that the bouquet of flowers gets shot out of Mob's hand, and he realizes that if I can destroy this, maybe he'll snap out of it as he attempts to do that. But Mob puts up a psychic barrier and protects them. This is clearly something he still recognizes as important to him, as he starts choking Hanazawa, as he says, say Kageyama, you're not supposed to use your psychic powers against others, right? And this time when Mob sends him flying, it's really bad. Like, he chucks him so hard, he flies across the city and slams into a building. Just like a freaking superhero in like a cartoon, dude, as he slams into a wall. He is not looking good. And it's here we just see Mob slowly walking towards Hanazawa, as we see that there are still people around him that haven't evacuated yet. As Hanazawa screams at him that there's still people here, you need to stop. But Mob is far from being able to listen at this point, as Hanazawa starts screaming that everyone needs to get out of here and go to a shelter immediately, as he ends up saving this mother and daughter by being crushed by debris. And as he looks at Mob, he says, Kageyama, are you having some kind of episode right now? To think you, of all people, would go berserk and lose control of your powers. I guess you're pretty average too. I'm a bit relieved, honestly. But it's here he notices that Mob's about to do a huge attack as he screams that there's still people here. But Mob doesn't stop. He releases his attack as Hanazawa looks horrified at what's happening around him as we hear the screams of all the people. Blood starts coming out of his eyes. That's how hard he's fighting back right now. And as all his clothes are getting thrown off and blown away, even his shoes are peeling back, he says, I know this. I've been watching this whole time. You're an absolutely gullible softie, but you're still really strong. And yet, when we first met, you were crying by yourself. I'm sure that's the case even now. You're crying, aren't you, Kageyama? You want someone to stop you. As Hanazawa is using everything he has to get close to Mob right now and bang on his chest to try to snap him out of it. And it's here we transition to inside of Mob's consciousness, where we see that he wakes up and it's like, what the heck is going on with me? As he looks around and says, I can tell that I did this. I'm the one that did this to Hanazawa too. And I know this is a serious moment, but I gotta be real. Hanazawa's hair always makes me laugh a little bit. I know I'm killing the mood, but it's kind of funny. I'm sorry. As Mob says, he tried everything he could to stop me until he ended up like this. As Hanazawa musters up the last of his strength and says, there are times when things don't work out. It's fine if people laugh at you. I'm average too. As Mob just starts crying his eyes out, saying, please stop, Hanazawa. You don't have to think of this as me. I can't stop this thing either. As he tells Hanazawa, yes, use your powers against me. Stop me right here. But Hanazawa continues and says, but don't underestimate me. As we see that throughout all of this calamity, Hanazawa was using so much of his energy to save all the people around him, as he declares to Mob that, I'm your rival, don't underestimate me. As he tells him, I guess I win this time. But he passes out from exhaustion. And during this episode, I gotta say that I gained a lot of respect for Hanazawa. That he was able to stand up to Mob, even though he's a friend of his, and try to stop him, because he knows that this is not what Mob would want. Hanazawa's a really good guy. It just goes to show you that Mob really changed him after season 1 for the better. But with him taking out a commission, however, that's one less powerful Esper that's around to stop Mob. So our situation has not improved. And it's here we see something that's pretty sad, honestly, to me. That we see that Tsubami is actually at their meeting point still. And is waiting for Mob, saying Mob is going to show up, right? That makes me so sad, because I know if Mob knew that, he'd feel like 30 times worse about what he's doing right now. That's sad as hell to me. And it's here we transition to around the city as we see all these people that are so close to Mob just getting a grasp of the situation as they see on the news a picture and they notice that, wait a minute, that's Mob doing all this? And it's here we see that the government is actually sending in convict psychics to help stop this situation, because they're expendable, obviously, to try to stop Mob, because Mob is this much of a threat right now. As they're even told that if you can help with this situation, they'll consider reducing your sentences. But all of these guys aren't important. Only one person here is, and that's Shizuki from our previous season, the antagonist of season 2, who Mob literally used everything he had to beat, is there. And he's being sent in to deal with Mob, as he says, I'll go by myself. The target can't be taken lightly. As he gets asked, is the target someone you know? As he says, I can feel his power growing even stronger. As he actually takes out the other inmates, because he doesn't need them. As the plane opens up, and he jumps out towards Mob, and our episode ends. And man, what an episode! This episode makes me really sad, like I said in the beginning, that Mob is doing all this. Clearly, he can comprehend that he's doing all this, but he doesn't have the ability to stop himself. And that's like a common trend throughout the show. That when Mob reaches 100%, he's unstoppable. He can't be stopped by anyone, even himself. So, I feel like the big thing that's going to resolve all this is Mob finally coming under control of these powers fully. That's what I think is going to happen at the end. And to think that Shizuki, of all people, would come in to try to oppose him is wild. Easily Mob's biggest threat. Out of everyone, easily Mob's biggest threat. That's wild. I don't think he won't be able to stop Mob. Like I said in the beginning of the episode, I think the only 3 people that can potentially stop Mob, and not even through sheer strength, just through emotion alone, is Reagan, Tomi, and again, Dimple. I think Dimple is alive still, because who got rid of the Divine Tree? Clearly someone did, and it was most likely Dimple. So, I don't know, man. I feel like these episodes are going to be emotional. They're going to be pretty damn emotional, I have to admit. I can just feel that in my gut. I'm very curious to know what's going to happen next week, though. Because we see in our preview that Ritsu is standing in front of him. And I know that if Mob hurts Ritsu in this, he's going to be heartbroken. And I don't want to see that, personally. But we'll have to wait and see next week. So you guys let me know what you thought of the episode down below. Because I like the episode still. That being said, I just wish we would go in a different direction for the final. But I get it. Big, grand spectacle fight. Of course, we got to have that. So, until next time, guys, I hope you have a great day, week, month, and year. And until then, deuces, and have a blessed day. I'll see you guys later.